최근 비트코인 4년 주기 이론을 말하는 사람들은 강세장이 끝났다고 경고합니다. 하지만 저는 다른 생각을 갖고 있는데요. 이번 사이클에는 전례 없는 두 가지 강력한 힘이 등장했기 때문입니다. 과연 이 요인들이 시장의 규칙을 바꿀까요? 브라보스 리서치 크립토에서 분석한 영상으로 같이 보시죠.
If you had invested $10,000 in Bitcoin back during the 2015 bear market bottom, it would have turned into $1 million just 35 months later. That same $10,000 invested in the 2018 bear market bottom would have grown to $200,000 over the next 35 months. But in both instances, Bitcoin saw over a 75% decline in the following 12 months. Fast forward to today's bull run, and Bitcoin has already delivered over an 800% return from its 2022 bear market bottom. But more importantly, we've now reached the 35-month window that coincided with the end of the last two bull markets. This timeline pattern is actually rooted in what's known as the Bitcoin 4-year cycle theory. According to this, the first 35 months after a bear market bottom make up Bitcoin's recovery and expansion phase. And following 12 months then mark the contraction phase as the market enters a painful unwind that resets the cycle. This timeline comes from Bitcoin's halving cycle, which happens roughly every 4 years. Each halving cuts the reward miners receive for validating new blocks in half, instantly reducing the supply of new Bitcoin entering the market. This supply shock often takes several months to fully work through the system. But as fewer new coins are created, existing supply becomes scarcer. And with demand staying steady or rising, that scarcity creates upwards pressure on price. We can see this cycle more clearly through this chart showing Bitcoin's 4-year performance following each halving event. In the 2015 to 2018 cycle, Bitcoin's halving took place in July 2016. What followed was a sharp rally for roughly 530 days, or about 18 months, before Bitcoin entered a 12-month bear market and then a 17-month recovery period. We saw something similar play out in the 2018 to 2022 cycle. The halving in May 2020 was followed by another powerful 18-month expansion before price peaked and entered a 12-month bear market, once again followed by a 17-month recovery phase. In the current cycle, Bitcoin's most recent halving occurred in April 2024. About 18 months ago. That puts Bitcoin right at the danger mark once again. So whether we measure from the bear market low or from the halving date, Bitcoin now faces a real risk of putting in a bull market top this month if the 4-year cycle timeline holds up this time around. And if that's the case, then we could be at the precipice of another big bear market decline.
자, 데이터대로라면 비트코인이 지금 당장 약세장, 하락을 시작해도 이상하지 않을 시점입니다. 하지만 이번 사이클은 이전과는 달리 두 가지 핵심적인 구조적 변화를 가지고 있습니다. 이 두 가지가 과연 비트코인 4년 주기를 깨풀이고 사이클을 연장시킬 수 있을까요? 첫 번째 요인 통화 정책부터 살펴보겠습니다.
The first key factor is monetary policy. This chart shows the federal funds rate, which tracks the interest rate set by the U.S. central bank. If we put Bitcoin's price on top, we see that heading into the 2017 bull market top, the Fed was already tightening monetary policy, taking rates from near 0% all the way to 2.5%. Higher rates makes borrowing more expensive, which slows down economic activity and reduces the amount of liquidity that can flow into risk assets like Bitcoin. We saw something similar heading into the 2021 bull market top. The Fed had begun signaling rate hikes to contain inflation, and that shift in policy once again brought Bitcoin's rally to an end. Today, however, the setup is completely different. The Fed has already begun cutting rates and is expected to continue doing so over the coming months. Easier monetary policy means cheaper borrowing costs, higher liquidity, and a stronger backdrop for risk assets like Bitcoin. And looking ahead to 2026, markets expect President Trump to appoint a new Fed chair, one likely to favor even looser policy, which could mean more rate cuts than even what's currently being priced in. So from a monetary policy perspective, this cycle is a polar opposite to the previous two cycles.
흥미롭게도 통화정책 관점에서 이번 사이클은 정반대의 상황입니다. 금리가 오르던 과거와 달리 지금은 금리가 내려가고 있죠. 이는 유동성 공급에 매우 긍정적입니다. 그렇다면 두 번째 핵심 변화, 즉 수요 측면의 대격변, 기관 투자자들의 움직임은 어떨까요?
The second key factor is institutional demand. This chart shows the number of Bitcoin bought by institutions each year compared to the number of new Bitcoin added to supply, essentially capturing the demand and supply balance. In the last cycle, we can see that new supply consistently exceeded institutional demand. But that trend completely flipped in 2024, as institutions bought over 900,000 Bitcoin, while only around 220,000 new coins were added to supply. And this year, the imbalance has become even more extreme. Institutions have already accumulated over 975,000 Bitcoin, while only around 135,000 tokens have been created through mining. That means demand is now running at more than 7 times the rate of new supply entering the market, something that wasn't present in the last 2 cycles. This has been one of the primary driving forces behind Bitcoin's strength throughout this bull run. But despite the overall price appreciation, Bitcoin has still not seen the type of extreme returns that it saw heading in the last 2 bull market tops. This chart compares Bitcoin's price to its long-term on-chain value. The shaded area represents how far Bitcoin's market price has moved above or below that underlying value over time. When it stretches far above, it shows that price is running ahead of fundamentals, which is a sign of growing euphoria. And when it dips deep below, it reflects periods of undervaluation. Heading into the 2017 bull market top, that gap expanded to 0.9, meaning Bitcoin's price had risen nearly 1 full magnitude above its on-chain value. The same thing happened again in 2021, when Bitcoin became extremely overvalued before the bear market began. But this bull run, that gap has not crossed the 0.6 mark. This tells us that Bitcoin hasn't yet entered the phase of irrational exuberance we typically see heading into major market tops. So we think it's possible that easier monetary policy and rising institutional demand continues to fuel this bull run for now, potentially extending the 4-year cycle. In fact, if we look all the way back at Bitcoin's first full cycle from 2011 to 2015 and compare it with the 2015 and 2018 cycles, we see something interesting. The 2011 cycle was actually shorter by almost a year. At that time, Bitcoin was still a young and emerging asset. Because of that, prices responded much faster to changes in capital flow and demand, leading to explosive gains early on and an earlier top compared to the usual 4-year cycle. It could be that we're seeing the exact opposite dynamic play out today.
오늘은 많은 투자자들이 우려하는 비트코인 4년 주기론의 위험 구간 진입에도 불구하고 왜 이번 사이클이 연장될 가능성이 높은지 심층 분석해봤습니다. 완화적인 통화 정책과 신규 공급량의 7배가 넘는 기관 수요라는 강력한 2가지 요인이 과거의 패턴을 깨고 시장을 더 멀리 밀어 올릴 수 있다는 것이 이 분석의 핵심입니다. 여러분은 이 분석에 대해 어떻게 생각하시나요? 여러분의 의견과 관점을 댓글로 공유해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.